Hello and welcome. We're here today to talk about slicing and dicing your hotel inventory. Now, I would like to begin by saying that it's been really fascinating to report on the hotel industry this past year. I have seen so much innovation and creative solutions to what has been an incredibly difficult period, and this webinar is going to explore these ideas. We are going to look at performance insights from across the traditional hotel accommodation as well as serviced apartments and extended stay. We're going to discover new ways of attracting long and short-term guests. And we're also going to look at the hotel and guest experience and what needs to be considered as we gear up to reopen. Now, this webinar series, the Trailblazer webinar series, has been designed to offer a glimpse of what to expect at the Urban Living Festival. And this is an event that we're launching at Tobacco Dock in London on the 7th and 8th of July this year. And I would like to show you guys our latest promo video. We've all witnessed the speed of change at which the world is evolving, and the Urban Living Festival is now so more relevant than ever as we look to define the future of hospitality and real estate.
Urban Living Festival came about really based around a lot of different hospitality and real estate asset classes all converging really at the same time. You've got co-work, co-live, PRS, built to rent, student housing. So the big idea really was ultimately quite simple, to bring everybody together. So I'm really looking forward to attracting, I'd say, real estate and hospitality urban innovators to explore what I suppose urban living actually is.
It's a thought leadership forum as much as it is a forum for business. I know I'm going to learn a lot about everybody that plays in it, so I'll learn a lot there.
So the Urban Living Festival is actually set around 3 stages called Stay, Live and Work. And so this webinar is perhaps one of the most relevant to this event, and the link to the Urban Living Festival website has been posted in the chat, so please do check it out. And before we begin, I am going to run through a few webinar guidelines. After my introduction, we are going to spend around 45 minutes in conversation with our Trailblazers, and we're going to spend some time at the end to take any questions from the audience. So please, if you do have any questions, submit these using the Q&A function and I will get round to these at the end. And the webinar is being recorded. Everyone that has registered will receive a copy of that recording within 48 hours. So my name's Eloise Hanson. I am the news editor of a B2B multimedia website called Boutique Hotel News. We are a platform for boutique, lifestyle and luxury hotels. Now, Boutique Hotel News is published by International Hospitality Media. And within our media portfolio, we also run 2 other sites called Serviced Apartment News and Short-Term Rentals. So now let's hear from our Trailblazers, and I will hand over to each for a brief introduction, and I'm going to move from left to right as per the PowerPoint slide, which means I am going to be beginning with David. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning for those of us in the US. My name's David Boud. I'm the founder and CEO of Salt Hotels. We have currently hotels in the northeast of America. We've just opened this past weekend in upstate New York, and are moving down to warmer climates later this year to Florida. My background is 20 years in the boutique hotel sector, working with Ian Traeger, Andre Balazs, Standard Brand, Morgan's Hotel Group, Ian Traeger Hotels. and now out on my own with Salt Hotels.
Thanks, David. And I'm coming to Laura next.
Hi, I'm Laura Sharpe. I'm the General Manager of the Hamyard Hotel, which is based in central London, which is part of the Ferndale Group. They have 8 hotels in London and 2 in New York. Hamyard is the only hotel in the group that has long stay apartments as well as hotel rooms. So we've stayed open throughout this whole period with guests staying with us and living with us. And the hotel's been open for 7 years and is the largest in the group. And I've been with the company for nearly 14 years.
Wow. Thank you, Laura. And over to Kevin, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Osterhaus. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Ennismore. We develop and operate Hoxton hotels in the U.S. We've got 4 in the U.S., New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Portland. We've got several hotels in Europe, a few in London and Amsterdam, Paris, and happy to report I'm in Rome today, opening our 10th Hoxton. So warmer weather here than certainly it is in London right now. We also have a few restaurants in London that we operate independently. My background, very similarly, lifestyle hotels. I was with Standard for a while. I say I aspire to follow in David's footsteps in a couple of occasions here. But happy to be here. Good to see everybody.
So thanks, Kevin. And last but not least, Wayne.
Thank you, Eloise, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wayne Androliakos, Chief Operations Officer for Cycas Hospitality. We have a portfolio of over 27 hotels in 5 countries, including 14 in the UK, 6 in the Benelux, 5 in France, and 2 in Germany. Of the entire portfolio, we have 14 extended stay hotels and 5 double pack hotels where we have 2 different brands in one building, mostly consisting of an extended stay hotel plus another full service brand. We try to be as broad as we can operationally be. We're completely brand agnostic, and we now work with 6 international hotel groups and 14 hotel brands, including IHG, Marriott, Accor, Radisson, and very recently Cubic this year. I think this really kind of gives flexibility to our owners and investors, as they know that we're pan-European. We have excellent relationships with all of the international hotel groups. We have a proven track record of operating successfully across a wide range of brands and segments. And it also means that we can learn from the brands and introduce the most effective best practice across the hotel operation. Cycas has doubled its business in the last 2 years, and we have plans to double again in the next 2 years. So that's Cycas in a nutshell, basically.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you all. And all the LinkedIn profiles of our Trailblazers have been popped into the chat, and I encourage everyone to connect and follow on the conversation today. So if you've joined one of my webinars before, I always like to offer some background to the conversation. And generally speaking, these are all stories that I've published on Boutique Hotel News. So this first slide is really to illustrate how some hotels are diversifying away from your, if you want to call them, traditional hotel stays. And to give you an idea, the top left-hand story about the Tawny, which is a hotel that's opening in the Peak District in the UK, is offering shepherd's huts, tree houses, cabins, boat houses, and lodges. And similarly, we jump over to Hutton Brick Yards from Salt Hotels in the States. And we have David on our panel today, who will most likely talk about this project in greater detail, having just opened it up over the weekend. But similarly, we have cabins and suites and outdoor event spaces and dining hubs. And the other 2 stories on this slide are perhaps what you might describe as a pop-up extension of a hotel, in that these tented accommodations are only available for a limited period of time, which brings me nicely onto the next slide, where we have the Hoxton, which is launching its mobile camper van offer / package this summer. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we also run a sister site called Short Term Rentals, and my colleague Paul, who's the editor, has seen such a huge increase in popularity for RVs and motorhomes. Not only are these types of companies reporting surges in demand and bookings for this summer, but some have successfully completed funding rounds, which speaks to the strong belief from investors in this product. Whilst we're also on this slide, I would like to point out that I've covered a couple of stories where projects are blending a hotel and a hostel. The bottom story is one where the owners have two separate products. So you've got the Anvil Hotel and Cachet House, which is a hostel, and they are literally sat on top of each other. I think what Wayne was describing earlier is like a double-decker property. The top right-hand story, however, is an example of a hotel and hostel under one roof, collectively called Book One. So we can see how owners are starting to think differently about their inventory. And finally, on the last slide, we have examples of how hotels have repurposed underused space. Firstly, we've got hotel rooms being transformed into offices. And perhaps taking this a step further, we've got one hotel room at the Draycott Hotel, which has been transformed into a green screen studio. I think it's also worth mentioning that some hotels have also moved into the event space in that they've pivoted to weddings. Not only has empty space been reimagined for weddings, but dedicated teams have been pulled together and new packages have been created just for these special occasions. And there's a whole host of guest relation and property management considerations going on here, which we'll probably touch on later. So enough of me. Without further ado, let's kickstart our conversation, and I would like to begin by coming over to Wayne. As you mentioned, Wayne, in the Cycas portfolio, you have a mix of full service, extended stay and double-decker properties. And I'm wondering if you can give us an overview about some performance insights across these assets.
Well, of course, it's been a really easy 12 months. I'm joking. Of course, it's been tough. I think, you know, anyone who says otherwise is probably lying to you. But I think what we did as Cycas right from the start was we kind of said to ourselves when we kind of realized that the COVID was here to stay and we needed to kind of react, was we needed to ensure that we had a very flexible model, because we could see that, you know, 24 hours in the COVID world was a long time and things changed overnight. The first thing we did was we said, right, let's start on and focus on commercial. What we realized was that there was a lot of brands and a lot of hotel companies that were kind of putting all of their commercial team on ice and kind of putting them on furlough. We did the exact opposite and said we really need to create different task forces to focus on different segments across Europe, and working with the brands to kind of draw those industries into our hotels. From an extended stay perspective, we've always worked with a very tight and multi-skilled staff structure because of the way the operation works. And with the mentality of, you know, all hands on deck, everybody does a little bit of everything, we need to be where the guest is. And we kind of took that mentality and kind of made sure that we aligned it across the portfolio, even into the full service hotels, as we kind of went into battle for all of the business that we needed to drive the performance of those hotels forward. From a double pack perspective, we worked with the brands and we kind of agreed with them to relax some of their brand standards as we kind of went through the kind of COVID challenges. We centralized our front desk into one of the hotels, operated both brands with one team, and all of that kind of paid dividends for us. I think, you know, the COVID-19 crisis actually put the extended stay hotels back into the spotlight in Europe. From a corporate key worker perspective, with the limitation on all of the F&B that was out there, there was literally, if you were staying in a hotel, there was nowhere to go out and eat. There was nowhere to kind of, you know, if you had different kind of dietary requirements, etc., it just became a huge challenge. And then with all of the restrictions around lockdown from a compliance perspective, it became really, really tough. And what we saw was having your own self-contained apartment in a hotel with all of the services that you would get from a hotel perspective really kind of started to pay dividends. And we saw whether you were staying one night or 10, that was a huge advantage during this time. And with that, obviously, given Cycas's bias and expertise in extended stay, we saw our overall portfolio outperform the market by probably, I think we were looking at just over 50% in 2020 in revenue terms, with all of our extended stay hotels achieving a positive GOP throughout the lockdown period. When we looked at STR, and STR was a very difficult thing to kind of measure at times because a lot of our comp set were kind of closed and there was no data. But one of the things that we did see where there was data available, our extended stay hotels were achieving RGIs in excess well over 300, and in one case we got to over 1,000 in a week. And that was just because we were driving the right pieces of business and we had the right product at the right time. Currently, our entire portfolio RGI for the last 12 months sits just under 190. And again, that's mainly due to the performance of the extended stay sector, driving that into the hotels and the commercial team really kind of focusing on that. On top of that, lockdown has been a busy year for us. I think we've opened 11 hotels in lockdown, 5 of which are extended stay, and that includes our first hotel with Radisson in Amsterdam, which was a Radisson Suites. We've also kind of opened a double pack just in the middle of lockdown in Slough, Moxie and Residence Inn, both of which have been well received and kind of are starting to gain momentum. So it's been a relatively positive story for Cycas, and I say relatively because everything these days is relatively.
It's certainly been bumpy, but the resilience of the extended stay sector has been so well documented. The other site in our portfolio, Service Department News, has been absolutely hot on covering all that important news, but also really encouraging news too. And Laura, I know you mentioned Ham Yard is the only hotel in the portfolio with the apartment arm to it. How does this tally with your experience?
I think that we've always had long stay apartments as part of our offering alongside hotel rooms, and they've run together quite well. It's the same team who's always looks after both. It's the same offering, it's just a slightly different longer stay concept with kitchens and bigger spaces, but they've always been historically very long lead, and it's been quite a niche market for who would wish to stay in those apartments. And then when we came to lockdown, these guests were staying with us and they were here, and we stayed open to look with those guests. And as you say, the people who were with us, their offering was very limited. We were the only place that they could, so that was also something that other people were looking for. They'd found themselves somewhere and they wanted to stay for longer. As we kind of came out of lockdown, the demand for long stay has just increased hugely, and we just saw an absolute rocket of inquiries for people wanting to stay longer term. And I think that also there was very much wanting something more of a homely feel. Yes, you can stay in a hotel room for a longer stay, but actually to have a bit of space and a bit of freedom with all of the kind of facilities that are available. Prior to lockdown, I would have said that we're starting to take the kitchens and out of this and some of the suites, because that was not something that people were looking for. That's turned on its head completely, and we're now wishing the ones that we did take the kitchens out of, that we put them back in. Anything with any outdoor space, anything with a balcony is absolutely premium, and our average length of stay even in the hotel during the last year went up hugely, because people are traveling, want to stay somewhere and not move around, and it was definitely find a base and stick with it. I think that when it came to what people were looking for, it was very much, yes, they wanted to stay somewhere longer. They also wanted to be comfortable with where they stayed, and there tended to be a lot more conversations happening, a lot more short lead, longer inquiries than we've ever seen before. But also there was a lot of people who wanted to stay with us because they knew the group, or they knew what they were going to get. And I think there was a lot around the safety of travel. There's not a lot of booking online. There was maybe shopping around online, but when it came to the final decision, they wanted to have a conversation directly with the hotel. There was also a lot of things about it being, a lot of people are very comfortable with having it exactly the same way as a hotel would be previously, and other people were wanting to know about whether there was going to be contactless check-in, what the situation was within rooms. And I think that is when it comes to moving forward, I think a lot of people have now got it slightly different, along with the team as well. The team also, some are quite happy to come back to work as normal. Some will need that extra bit of reassurance. This year has proved, I think, that things are going to change slightly, and we need to be mindful of how people feel about travel again, and what that's going to look like moving forward.
Have you noticed any change in the way that guests are actually using the hotel and the apartments?
Initially, everybody was much more focused on staying within the hotel. So they wanted to be able to check in, they wanted to be able to dine here. There was not a lot of, they wanted to have everything within all the business meetings they wanted to have here. They traveled to a space, they were comfortable and didn't want to. And at the moment, I've got people coming in, they will only book a room if I can guarantee that they've got a table in the restaurant, because they don't want that. If they're comfortable and they've made a decision that's where they want to be, they don't want to then have to think about, am I comfortable going to another venue? So I think there's some of those things, the use of, I'm lucky we've got lots of spaces within the hotel that people can use. There is a lot of people wanting to be within the hotel and have business meetings in the hotel rather than go out somewhere else and have those and then come back and just use this and stay, spending a lot more time here, which is great.
Thanks, Laura. And just as Laura mentioned, I guess one of the biggest changes that I've seen is definitely within the F&B space, and that many have really had to pivot quite quickly and adopt what you might call a digital solution, so that you can do a takeaway food delivery option. And Kevin, I understand the Hoxton introduced 2 delivery-only kitchen brands in London. And I'm curious to hear, how has that concept been received by the guests and the surrounding areas too?
Sure, we did. It's funny, as Wayne said, 24 hours during COVID was a very long time. Things changed a lot in a period of 24 hours. We've all played catch up constantly on these changing restrictions, both in countries and the US. Each state has different restrictions. And so when restaurants started to close earlier or implement curfews, we'd open earlier. When we had to close restaurants, then we'd shift dining to private dining rooms in our guest rooms. When we couldn't occupy rooms, then we were forced to really focus on takeout and delivery. And we got very creative. In fact, our F&B teams, I think, got accustomed to what they started calling Curveball Fridays, where we'd throw these different challenges at them at the end of every week, just to see what we could do to continue to be creative. And we launched a couple of dark kitchens. One of our concepts was called Tandoor Tacos. We have a concept called Tandoor Chop House, which is an Indian restaurant in London. And as an offshoot of that offering, we launched Tandoor Tacos, these brilliant tacos that we started delivering. We also launched a concept called Pecking Order, which is fried chicken and chicken sandwiches, really good for delivery for pickup and takeout as well. The other thing we did is expand an all-day dining concept we have called Egg Break. We moved that into a couple of our other kitchens. And so I think the response has been amazing in that during a complete lockdown, the ROI it's there because we have a minimal investment, if no investment at all, simply because the kitchens are operating. We've got the teams in place, and the alternative to that is less breadth in our offering or not having teams working at all. So it worked out incredibly well. And if even at worst we broke even, it was worth continuing to do that. But what we found it allowed us to do even more importantly is as we opened, it allowed us to grow extremely quickly. We incorporated these concepts in many cases into our ground floor offerings. In London, as an example, more than 50% of the food that we sell on our menus takeaway and in the hotel is one of the concepts, is food from the concepts that we launched during lockdown. And it's allowed us also to have an arsenal. One of the other Curveball Friday projects is a food truck. We're about to start launching food truck operations and have this available for events. And so we were also able to expand it. So right now in Paris and in Amsterdam, where we have minimal dining, in fact, it's all takeaway and delivery right now in Paris, and Amsterdam now has some outdoor dining. Amsterdam, it represents 60% of our food sales, and in Paris, our pecking order concept represents the best selling items we have right now. So it's, to answer your question, it's been received very well, but it's also allowed us to continue to utilize our teams to take advantage of kitchens that don't need any additional investment, and really capitalize on this culture over the last year of needing to have options for delivery for all of us.
I've just from my own conversations, I've spoken to quite a few hoteliers who are, I guess, looking to outsource their food and beverage operations as a result of the pandemic. Everything's closed. What can we do? It's an extra revenue stream. Are dark kitchens something that you would look at rolling out permanently as part of the Hoxton?
I think so. I think dark kitchens are one part of it. I'm a big believer in it if we can capitalize on resources that we already have. So the infrastructure is there, the teams are there. We're trying to build our food and beverage momentum back up again. Absolutely, I'm a big fan of continuing to provide our own food and beverage, develop our concepts, grow what we're able to offer in our hotels in conjunction with the workspaces that we have, in conjunction with the guest rooms that we have. And as we grow, absolutely we continue to focus on takeout and delivery options. It's opened up a new world for us.
Thanks, Kevin. And I guess with dark kitchens, that is one example of how space has been maximised. I'd like to come to David next, please, and ask, how have you been maximising your space at your hotels?
I think as everyone has said, it's this has been the most interesting 15 months in the hospitality industry, I think, for all of us. And hopefully we'll never have to go through 15 months like it again. But we sat down very early on, and we initially closed and then reopened. And as we reopened, we looked literally back at plans of the hotel and said, okay, what spaces do we have that we can use for other things? What are our guests looking for right now? And very early on, probably this time last year, May time, we turned all of our meeting space into work from hotel space. So we set a large ballroom up with 20 desks, all very, very separate, printing services, little cafe in the corner. And it was a huge hit. And one of the interesting things was we stopped looking at revenue and profitability by department, and we looked at it much more as by hotel, because the events department was never going to make any money because no one was coming to events. And so we didn't want to focus too much on the negative profitability of one department, but look at it of how that department can help another. So we could sell rooms. We were selling 20 rooms a night using this work from hotel system. And we actually got into, as it developed and the weather got better, people would rent the desk just for the morning, and then they go to the beach in the afternoon, and we'd be able to rent it to someone else. So then we were sort of building, 30 to 40 rooms a night, and really focusing on the profitability of the entire operation. Another fun thing we did was nobody was using their offices because a lot of people were working from home. We had at that point a lot of people not comfortable coming in, so we turned our central reservations office into a small meeting room. And I think Laura was saying, people wanting to stay in the hotel and not go out. It really doubled the number of meeting rooms that we had. The GM moved out of his office. We turned that into a meeting room. And it was really, okay, let's look at every space that we can possibly use. And the big space was outdoors, how can we capitalize on any outdoor space that we have? And I think that, when you walk around New York now, you see how somebody has turned a parking space on a major avenue in New York into a small dining area. And what it enabled us to do was to stop thinking that everything has to be completely polished and finessed. It can be fun. it can be of a pop-up mentality. And people love it. And people have really responded well to that. They appreciate the effort. We've turned walkways into outdoor cafes. We've got food trucks serving multiple different lawn areas, lots of picnics. And I think it's the beauty of our sector of the industry generally is we can turn on a dime, that we can really alter things quickly. And I think that has been the critical success to everyone here that I've been watching and stealing the good ideas that everybody has, but because that's what we should all do. But I think that we've been able to turn things around really quickly and see some positive things out of a really challenging year.
Absolutely. I think we all need to spread some positive vibes far and wide. It has been tough, but I wouldn't say it's stealing ideas either. I think sharing ideas has been the best way to collaborate and move through this. And I'd like to ask David whether you think that there's going to be a premium on space as a result. I had this conversation with another hotelier right back at the start when we were right in the throng of the first lockdown, and he believed so that there is going to be such demand for outdoor space and outdoor tourism that therefore pricing and ratings can all be pushed up. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we were in a very fortunate place that we were already developing Hutton Brickyards, upstate New York, which is 100 acres, all outdoors. And we were developing that pre-COVID. And so our timing was just perfect. Our restaurant is outdoors. Our meeting space is all outdoors by one room, and we have 31 individual cabins. And what we pro-formed our rates would be, we are seeing significant upticks on that, is the desire and the want for right now to be sort of out in wider spaces, to be able to walk around a resort like this in America without wearing a mask is significant, and it makes people feel really great, but they still want to make sure that safety, that security is all there, that protocols are in place to protect the guests, but they can choose how much they interact with someone or don't. You can come here and you can go and hike and you can have room service and you can never see another person if that's what you choose to do. And I think that's what's interesting now, is the sort of the mixed use spaces that we're seeing.
I wonder whether you think we're going to see more mixed use schemes as a result of the crisis.
I've been a believer for a long time, having worked in the UK and started in a country house hotel, and I think there's such a massive interest of people going to country house hotels for weekends and retreats and things like that. And it's not been as big in the US. And so, I think I'm very hopeful that it will continue. It will continue to grow. And if you look at an area like upstate New York, there's about 7 major companies and major resorts that are developing huge resorts within sort of 2.5 hours from the city. And we're looking at 2 others too. So, that will help economies of scale, accommodation in one, wedding in another, and things like that. So I think it is definitely something that is going to be seen a lot more of in the future.
Thanks, David. And going back now to space and the use of space, I'd like to come back to Kevin and ask whether you think that is there a risk of maybe over manipulating space for commercial sake? And how would you mitigate this if so?
Well, I think there's a risk. Sure, there's a risk of failure. I mean, of doing something that just simply doesn't work. But I think it's a risk we're all obligated to take right now. I think we've got an obligation from a commercial perspective as operators to just try and use our space for different things. And I think it's one thing to do that, and as a response to what we're seeing. And I think most importantly, if we're paying attention to people's needs when they travel and what they need when they're in our hotels or in our spaces, then we'll be successful. And right now, I'll give you a few examples. We've had to quickly adapt our offerings in our shared workspaces. We have 2 co-work spaces, one in Chicago, another in London, called Working From, and both launched just prior to the pandemic. And I don't know if you would predict this, but they've continued to do well. We've increased our sales. We've had to introduce creative offerings. People aren't living in the city, so when companies are renting space, maybe their employees aren't using the desks like they thought they would. So we're allowing for what we call rotations right now. If people are not in town, they can have 10 desks in what they've purchased from us and rotate 15, 20 people through those desks at any given time in order to use that space, because people don't need it right now like they might have when they were in the cities before the pandemic. We've also allowed for a relay. If you're in an apartment with somebody else and you've rented space, you guys can split that space, use it for 2 days, your roommate can use it for 3 days. And we're just trying to get creative. And as a result, we've continued to see success with shared workspace. Because right now, even attached to the hotels and people staying in the hotels, traveling into the cities, use the space that their company might be renting from us in our shared workspace. People just need to do this. They need to be able to find a quiet place. They need strong internet. They need to be able to have a Zoom call without being bothered. So really being responsive to work needs, evolving our shared workspace concept to do that both with our hotel guests and with companies that are with us already. I think another thing that we've been responsive to in our space and we touched on it earlier, small events, micro weddings. I mean, it's amazing, even with our employees, how many weddings have been canceled or postponed as a result of the pandemic. So as soon as we were able, launching our spaces, putting really great packages out there to take care of all of the details in a Hoxton style for these small groups that just need a place to get married during the pandemic. We've had a blast doing that. It's been received extremely well, and we're starting to launch that in all of our hotels with small social groups as well. So just where we can with the restrictions, being responsive and providing that. I think the last thing we've done in response, and this isn't necessarily as much with our space, but we have the rooms to be creative, both to try things and experiment while the inventory is there, but also to do good, to benefit people where we can, like providing rooms to the NHS. We're giving away hundreds of rooms in London right now to the NHS in order to just use our rooms for something good. We've launched €1 student in need guest rooms in Paris right now, which is, as you can imagine, for €1 has had a massive response in Paris. We have the space to do it, and we have the space to experiment. And if nothing else happens, we're going to come out of this highly educated on what works and what doesn't work and what people respond to. I think one of the most fun things we did, and you mentioned it earlier, is Camp Hox. Last year we launched luxury Hox style camping in Oxfordshire. It sold out in minutes for the entire duration of its offering. This year we decided to take it global, and we launched Camp Hox in the camper van, like you mentioned, and with curated itineraries that we partnered with to provide every minute of every 3 or 4 day itinerary for somebody in Camp Hox. And again, in less than 5 hours, all of our UK itineraries were sold out. So talk about a need. As David mentioned, people want to be outside. They want to be away from cities, and they want creative ways of doing things. And in each case, we include guest rooms so that we know at some point they're going to be staying in the guest room either before or after their itinerary, at some point after their camping stay. And that just drives, obviously, ancillary revenue in restaurants. So we're just continuing to think about how to use our space for the evolving needs and what is actually taking place at a time when people need creativity and we don't have travel. So it's yes, it's possible to over manipulate, but I think the bigger risk is not trying anything.
Well argued. I like that answer. And I guess with reoccupation strategies as well, you're going to have to start thinking about, especially if you are delivering a package, staffing and teams, and how on earth you maybe rethink and restructure your teams, which brings me over to Wayne. What's been Cycas's approach to staffing? I mean, have you had to reimagine team structure at all during these past 12 months or so?
The short answer is, listen, hospitality is a people business, so successful hotels are underpinned by their staff. Cycas has a mantra that is that we recruit A players who love what they do. Extended stay hotels, as I've said before, by their very nature, have a very flat staffing structure where the entire team, including the GM, are people who don't mind rolling up their sleeves, getting involved, and are recruited and trained to be multi-skilled and move around the hotel as and when the guest needs them to, basically. Not only does this give us a cost efficiency, but it also kind of really helps with team engagement, etc. I think this mentality has served us really well in the extended stay world, and what we saw over COVID was it works just as well in the full service hotels. We have a hotel in London where we're taking quarantine business at the moment, and literally the GM phoned me yesterday and he was cleaning rooms in the morning, trying to support his team. We have the guys in the kitchen kind of serving all of the meals during that time as well. And the days of having multi-layered staffing structures in hotels is just, I think, kind of changing, and I don't think it's necessarily going to go back to what it was previously. Of course, we've made a decision as well to insource housekeeping. We don't outsource housekeeping anymore, and again, that has opened us up to another talent pool of people who we can engage, develop, cross-train. And I think as we kind of come out of the whole time through COVID and everybody starting to look for jobs, particularly at that level, I think we're going to struggle to find those people, and we're going to need to start finding ways to engage with them. Recruiting this kind of person, I think, can be a challenge. We've always refused to accept traditional hospitality norms, and how we recruit usually is through audition days. We get a group of people in, we give them a ton of different group activities to do, and they don't necessarily have to have had any hotel experience in the past. What we're looking for is personality, because we can train in all of the rest of the skill set that we need. I think this was obviously kind of considered a bold move 14 years ago when we did it, but now there's a lot of hotel companies who are really embracing that. And ironically, we ran virtual audition days while we were opening our hotel during COVID. So just like here, we were kind of doing group exercises and moving people into different Zoom rooms, etc., and kind of getting them to interact and build things at home, etc. And it was really well received. We had some really good feedback from the teams and we've recruited some really exceptional team members through it as well. I think, those are the kind of things that we've kind of had to do to kind of find the right person. As I've said, recruitment in the hospitality industry has always been a challenge, but now where everyone is at the same time trying to open at the same time and recruit at the same time, it's going to be a huge challenge. And I think, the days of us interviewing employees has flipped. The employees are now interviewing the employer, and we just need to change that mindset and remember that. I think, simply paying the going rate for someone is just not enough in the hospitality industry anymore. So at Cycas, we right from the beginning, we never had a HR department. We've always had a people and culture team whose key focus is driving employee engagement across our portfolio, focusing on training, retraining, and helping our Psych cadets thrive. I think we've introduced quarterly Cycas Wellness Weeks. We've introduced work-life balance seminars. We've done financial, physical, mental, and emotional well-being seminars throughout the last 12 months. And this has particularly helped us with engagement, particularly for team members who are on furlough. We've wanted to make sure that they felt part of the team as well, even during those lockdown periods, because they're so much more likely to come back to us after COVID kind of has moved on. And then on top of that, we've created a Safari, which is our Future Leaders program, where we invest in a selection of key team members across the portfolio, across Europe, and we kind of put them into different training courses and drive them into different GM positions across the portfolio. So yeah, I think you've got to do more as in hospitality now to engage. We've kind of lost a lot of our team members to places like Amazon or into the like Sainsbury's, etc. They have a much better work-life balance. They probably get paid slightly more in some of those companies as well, and kind of winning their trust back after we've kind of put them on furlough, etc., for the time that we have is important. So I think a focus needs to be on kind of engagement.
I've published a couple of features of late all around recruitment and perhaps what employees and employers are going to be looking for. And you hit it on the nail there, Wayne, that employers now are going to maybe start saying, this is what we can offer you, not what can you offer us. And yeah, times are definitely changing. And I guess throughout this whole pandemic, I've upskilled in many ways. I still work within hospitality to a degree, and I'm sure hotel teams have had to pick up the odd job and muck in and do things that they never expected that they would be doing. And Laura, I suppose, as a general manager, as a very hands-on role, I would assume that you've probably experienced the same and seen the exact same with your team. So with hotels soon now looking to reopen in the UK next week, so exciting, but how are you now preparing to attract short and long stay guests? And perhaps you can weave in, what are your teams now doing with all this upskilling that we've all done?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everybody has done things throughout the whole time that they wouldn't necessarily have done before, and I think actually it's given everybody a good opportunity to reassess, and where you're doing a job, the hotel's always open and you're just kind of on that kind of treadmill keeping going, and it has given people the time to think, oh, actually we've gone out and done other things. We opened up a cafe here because the team were here anyway. All of the cafes in Soho closed. We had the team here and the ability to make food, so we opened it up to the local community and did a cafe, and myself and the rest of the team were there serving in the cafe, and it was really interesting to think, okay, we can pivot. We did do the food boxes as well, and afternoon teas we kept going, but actually there were myself and members of the team doing things that were completely different to what we would have naturally done, and has made us think that, you know, that people have got other skills and they'll continue to go on and use that in the future. I think for opening, yes, we get to open fully hopefully on Monday, and it's going to be a very interesting time, because as a city centre hotel, I think that countryside hotels have got a perfect, if you've got some outdoor space, everybody's wanting to, can't go abroad, but let's get out of the city. Coming into central London is a little bit of a tougher ask. I'm very lucky. We have outdoor space. I have outdoor dining. And we've been open since the 12th of April, and that's been the demand for sitting outside, even whatever the weather, has been off the, I mean, Saturday afternoon was just, the weather here was absolutely atrocious, yet we were still full, because people will, at the moment, that is, people will put up with a bit of inclement weather if they can go out and have those experiences again. I think that it is capitalizing on those areas. Also, we've seen a big demand for packages. People want things put together. They want to come and stay, dine, have a spa treatment, everything all together, not having to think about it too much, and don't want different elements of things. So we've definitely seen that those, anything that where we can put it together for them, has been something that people are very, very interested in. I have to say, some of the things that we thought that would change have not. Like I was saying, every webinar I listened to in the first lockdown was mini bars are a thing of the past and no one wants them. I ended up putting every single one back, because people do actually want that kind of convenience and things in the room. And we have, as I've said about takeaway throughout this whole period, because people haven't been allowed to dine anywhere else other than the hotel they're in, there's been a lot of more food delivered into the hotel. So with Deliveroo and things like that, and that's something that previously we would never really have seen, particularly here, but now that is something that's quite commonplace and something that people are doing a lot of. So I think that that's possibly something that will have to be, people are used to dealing with that. That's part of their normal life. It's part of the way that they would order. If they want to have a Nando's, they will order whatever other chicken chains are available, but they will order that, and that's because they're what they want. So I think that's something else that we'll need to come up with. I do think it is much more about the individual and what they're comfortable with, and what they're happy. There's a lot more flexibility needed. Our check-in and check-out times have basically gone out the window. You can arrive when you like, you can depart when you like, because I'm not generally selling the room the night after to keep that area safe. So the flexibility for guests is, and I don't have that big check-in period at 3 o'clock. That's kind of gone. That was naturally going anyway. I think that might be something that's totally changed. And yeah, just anything that we can do that is here and we can help with the booking of, that is definitely something that I think people are very interested in.
Thanks, Laura. I'd like to ask this question to you because it's specifically about kitchenettes, and I know you mentioned that you wished you never took some of the kitchenettes out. And a question from Edward Wilcock: how long do you believe the current trends caused by COVID will last? Considering lockdown is hopefully coming to an end, will kitchenettes and other self-contained amenities remain in demand?
I think at the moment, particularly as we've got quite a few people who wish to quarantine, that's also something, as long as quarantining is something that is required, I think that might be something that's needed. To be honest, the kitchens aren't used. Everybody demands that they have a kitchen, and I would say I could go into 95% of them after departure and no pans have been used, maybe the kettle, but I don't think it's something that probably is going to although the idea of it I think is something. We've also seen a lot of people wanting specific gym equipment in rooms. That's something I've never had before, but that's huge now. So you know, people want to have their workout in their room. So I think that once the time spent in the room decreases, which at the moment everybody feels like they should go and do their thing and then return, I think that it'll probably go. But I definitely think a smaller kitchen situation where you can just make a cup of coffee in the morning, yes. Actually cooking, I don't think anybody really is.
Thanks, Laura. And I'm going to finish off our conversation today with David, with some questions to David. And I know that you mentioned that you began your the Hutton Brickyards project pre-COVID, and that the timing of launching Brickyards is just absolutely on the point, impeccable. How do you ensure, in this case, the lifetime value of a project?
I think, you know, I always say when we're looking at a project is creating it and developing it, and so it's going to be timeless. I think there are, you know, some great inspirations in our industry, Ian Schrager, Andre Balazs, who have created, you know, just incredible timeless spaces that 30 years on are still really hot and really popular. So I think it's not making anything too fashionable is critical. I think you have to take into consideration what's happening now, but keeping things so they can be flexible. I think one of the things we've all learned is we've had to be more flexible with our spaces. And so as we're developing new projects now, there's a lot less fixed things in our hotels than there has been in the past. And so I think, you know, that's something that we're focusing on. Constant reinvention, you know, as we've talked about. I think that this group has done that incredibly well, of just, they're like, okay, every day I love Curveball Fridays, you know, from Kevin. It's like, and that's what it's been like for the last 12 months. Everything has required us to keep changing direction and having no control of it. And generally for a bunch of control freaks, it's been a tough year. I do think it's important not to panic. I do think it's important. You know, I've heard so many times. A year ago, I heard, you know, New York is dead. No one's ever going back to New York. It's done. And now, yeah, I was talking to a friend who has multiple hotels in New York City. They're running at over 90% occupancy at weekends. You know, their midweek corporate business is certainly down. And, you know, that's a condition of where we are. But I do think that things, whether it's a new normal or whatever that might be, things, you know, people want to travel. Google is a great example of, you know, saying we are going back to the offices because we're missing the creativity that we had when we weren't in the office. And so I think that that is going to have a really positive effect on us as hoteliers, because that's going to put more corporate travel again, people going to meetings. So I think it's really important not to panic and not to create everything around a pandemic that will hopefully be, the next one will be in 100 years and none of us will have to see it. And, you know, I think that looking, and as I said earlier on, and you're right, it's not stealing, it's sharing, it's looking at what everybody's doing. You know, I think that really helps us as an industry. There's some incredible creatives out there that, you know, I'm on every single hotel, competitive hotel mailing list, and you get tons of it, tons of information, tons of mailers, but there's, you know, there's so many great things that you can learn and, you know, adopt it, adapt it, and put it into your own operation. And so, you know, I think those sorts of things really help a project have a much longer life.
Mm-hmm. I have one final question come through from the audience, which I will again direct to you, David, because I know that you, again, with Hudson Brook Yards, your bookings go far into the future. So with guests requiring more flexibility and more last minute booking changes, how is this affecting future forecasting? And do you think cancellation charges will be a thing of the past after the crisis?
It's a great question. You know, I was talking to somebody from an airline recently about this very subject of flexibility on booking. You know, I hope so. I hope we all now can be a little bit more flexible. And but the trouble is, I think, is that demand dictates how we are from a booking policy way. And, you know, when we have to think of the business, and if we have a, you know, in a resort operation, if somebody's canceling because it's a bad weather forecast for the weekend, you know, that can really mess up your forecast. So I think it has to be, you know, I would say from us, we're looking at, we used to do in our resort properties, we used to do a 50% deposit on booking. You know, we now do that 50% deposit 7 days out. And so, you know, that's the difference that that we've done. Forecasting is crazy hard right now. It is, every tool that we've spent a fortune on having is completely useless. And so none of it can dictate anything. We're sort of, I mean, we've gone almost really back to sort of manual of 2018, 2019 and looking at, you know, how are those trends affecting what we're doing today. So it's certainly the hardest thing to forecast. I was working on another panel recently of developing a system which was a 10-minute forecast. And so we developed a whole system of being able for the entire hotel to be able to do a forecast in 10 minutes because it's constantly changing. And we didn't want forecasts to be spending forever. So there's a little plug for that, because that's out there with the Peter Russell partnership. But I think, you know, it is a really, it's a very changing market. And as Kevin said earlier on, in the US, it's also state driven. So it's government driven, state driven. Everything is moving. And I don't think we've seen the end of the movements and the end of the shifts yet. I think, you know, there's still some way to go. And so it's remaining flexible. It's, and you know, and learning and listening again to what everybody else is doing, and talking to every colleague in the industry, because that helps us, you know, helps us all forecast and expect what's happening.
Oh, Thank you. And thank you to our Trailblazers, and thank you to all those that have submitted their questions. We are now past 3 p.m. BST, so I am going to wrap up rather quickly. I'm next coming back with the Trailblazer webinar on Monday, May the 24th for a session called Ready, Set, Go, Maximizing Bookings. The registration link has been posted in the chat, and you can find further information here and who I will be in conversation with. And as I mentioned earlier, the Urban Living Festival is taking place this summer, July the 7th to the 8th at Tobacco Dock in London. We do hope to see all of you there at what could be one of the first big events back for the industry. We are so excited. And if you would like to hear more information about ULF, please get in touch with my colleague Katie. Her details are on your screens now, and I believe her LinkedIn profile has been posted into the chat, so do ping her a message. Well, that is it. That is all from us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And once again, thank you so much to our Trailblazers. I've certainly learned a lot, and talking about sharing ideas, I think we've achieved just that today. So enjoy the rest of your days, and we will catch you all very soon.